Okay. And well, just a couple of ground rules. There are a lot of you, and I'll have to speak for another hour or less. And please keep me safe my voice. In case you want to ask something, you're free to raise your hand and ask me direct questions. Please don't talk between yourselves too loud. Please don't speak too loud. So today we have a topic to discuss, and that's international economic relations and the role of entrepreneurship. And actually these are two huge topics which are limited not only by single class, but maybe a whole specialization of knowledge, and we'll have to fix it somehow into 45 minutes of our class. I can call it a lesson for 45 minutes. So my goal is to make you interested in international economic relations and to show you the future threats, dangers, hazards of entrepreneurship growth. Because things might be complicated when you will graduate from college. But perhaps you should be somehow aware of it from the very start so that you should know what you should be studying. Okay, so the first point, international economic relations. There is a complex definition and a simple definition. The complex definition that international economic relations is a system of relations between transnational agents based on production, exchange, consumption of goods and services, complicated by financial capital movements and international labor migration. Okay, any questions with that? Oh, of course it is. Of course it is. So actually, international economic relations is a system of economy complicated by transnational actions. So this is economic relations through the borders. And economy is actually a huge entity. Because economy is, it's basically everything you do. Because from Greek, economy meant the household. So every housekeeper who tried to manage goods in her fridge actually was doing economy. And international organizations crediting governments are also doing economy. Difference is just in the scale of the business. The problem is that economy might be somehow more complicated. So as a housekeeper managing her fridge and trying to feed her child, she knows that her child loves cookies, but somehow she has to feed him some fruit and groceries and greens, but the child would want to eat only cookies. So somehow you have to manage that. Somehow you have to persuade your child to eat what his body needs, not just what his sugar addiction wants. Same with economy. There are different types of production. And actually economy is a virtuous cycle of employment, production, and consumption. So actually this is all there is in economy. I'll write that for you because this is my favorite scheme. Production, consumption, okay, to keep the economy running, you have to produce something, whatever there is. And if you want to produce something, you have to somehow sell it. And you sell it to the consumer. It's easy, right? However, the consumer has to have money to pay for your product or service. And he has to earn them somewhere, generally when he's employed. And to be employed, you have to work somewhere. And working somewhere means being part of one's production. So this is the Keynesian triad, named after major 20th century economist Sir John Maynard Keynes. We'll speak about him a lot in our future classes, but actually this is what makes economy coming. And when this cycle is broken, it's called the crisis. Because people lose employment, people lose jobs, meaning they can't consume because they don't have money, and as long as they can't consume, productivity also declines. So the goal of, yes?
So are you telling us that economy has three parts, which is production, consumption, and economy?
This is one of the views, because we can analyze economic system through many different planes. This one I think, is the most obvious to show how economy is working. Yeah. Because, we can analyze economy in a lot of ways. Through budget or monetary policies, through taxation, through migration, through its part in international economic distribution of labor. But we start small, right? So that's easy. You want to be employed, you want to earn money, you have to produce something so that other people should consume that. International economy works the same way. But there is minor complication in international economy. Well, you should already know that sometimes to produce something, we have to spend something, correct? Because goods and services, they cost something. They cost not to the customer, but to the producer. So for example, to sell 1 ton of wheat, you have to pay for the seeds, for the land, and for the labor. Right, so that will be your cost. And the difference between production costs and economic value is your value added. And this is what economists, entrepreneurs are running for. They want to maximize their added value. So to spend less, to earn more. This is what drives economy. The thing is that added value is different in all the segments of economy. So for example, in agriculture, we have low value added. In IT engineering, we have high value added. In machinery, in car production, in nuclear energy, everywhere we have different value added. That's clear, right? Now I have a question to you. What makes economic agents work in the fields with low value added, meaning they will earn less money? Any ideas?
Subsidies.
Well, you should.
To some extent.
Subsidies, yes, they might stimulate farming. But anyway, even subsidized farmers will earn less than Amazon, right?
Low taxes.
But still Amazon is the richest company. Amazon, Apple, Google, they all have high value added. Why can't everyone make Amazon, Apple, and Google?
Because if everything is based on the high technology sphere, there is no food basically.
Right. Well, first of all, some economic phenomena such as competition help us settle the balance. Because if you want to create new Google, you have to compete with other people wanting to create a new Apple or Google or whatsoever. Correct? So in agriculture, you have the lowest competition. People will always want to eat food. Guys, you distract me. Could you please? So in high value added areas, right? You earn more money, but you have more competition. Well, I guess there are a lot of you using smartphones, and there are most competitive smartphones and least competitive smartphones. I doubt that any one of you uses HTC, for example. You might, but it's not the most popular because, well, they're losing the competition race. And Apple or Samsung or these new Chinese guys like Xiaomi or Meizu, they're winning this race. So actually, competition is leveraging things. Competition is working to some extent. However, when we deal with international economy, things become more complicated. Because on the national level, countries actually can support their high value added exports. So for example, you know, the richest country in Europe. What's the richest country in Europe? Germany, right. Germany, then France, then Great Britain, then Italy. Well, but Germany is the richest. What makes them rich?
High value production.
And exports, right. High value added production and exports. So Germany produces the most competitive cars in the market, together with Japanese. And that makes German export second or third in the world. So by the absolute volume of exports, country number one today is China. Right? Country number two, no. By net export, US is not the major country. Net export is the difference between exports and imports. So US imports a lot. That makes them a huge economy with a huge overall export-import volume. But by net export, meaning the difference between what they export and what they import, they are far from being the first. So it's China, Japan, and Germany. And of course, Japan and Germany, they are competing on the in the field of machinery, cars, engines, sophisticated engineering. The thing is that Germans are not the only state producing cars. Also, for example, you all know French cars like Peugeots, Renaults, Citroëns. Somehow France is not in the top list of exporting countries because they're losing the global competition on the cars market, meaning they have to produce better to win the competition. And approximately 6 years ago, I guess François Hollande was the Prime Minister of France, and he claimed the German Cabinet of Ministers, ruled by Angela Merkel, that production of German cars threatens French economy. Can you tell me why? Just think about it. German cars, being that good, they threaten French economy.
Yeah, because he feared that the production it was at a high rate, and France was losing the market because of the high cost of the production.
Right.
It was really good than what France does. So based upon that, the production of France into the market, I mean their demand will decrease. At the end of the day, the German production will take over. So that will affect the economy.
Absolutely correct. The thing is that we have this circle, right? So French produce cars. They employ people on these car plants, like Peugeots, right? But they need consumption, and the consumption is declining in France because people want to buy German cars. Supposedly, consumers think the German cars are better. So French have to shut down plants. Well, they shut down in 2010 or 11, might be mistaken, but somewhere there. They shut down the Peugeot plant and they had to dismiss approximately 80,000 workers. And you know the social benefits for unemployed in France, and those 80,000 workers will have to receive the donations from the budget. The budget that has to pay donations to unemployed, subsidies to unemployed, instead of receiving taxes from the production and sales of those French cars. So actually, yes, had the Germans produced worse cars, that will be beneficial for French economy. That would balance the economy somehow. What can countries do to protect their national producer? And this is where international economic relations come in handy. Because international economic relations is not only about production and distribution, it's also about regulations. meaning we have World Economic Organizations regulating relations between different bodies or agents of economy globally. Such economic organizations are the major one you all should know is the World Trade Organization, WTO. And some minor like World Bank, EBRD, International Finance Corporation being the part of the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Organization for International Cooperation and Development. They all have their own goals and missions. But let's start big. This time we start big, we start from the WTO. WTO is the organization that started from 1947 after the World War II, when the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs was signed. So actually, World Trade Organization started as the agreement between states on the trade. General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs imposed quotas between member states, between actors of the agreement. Meaning, Germany, according to General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, was allowed to sell specific amount of cars, right? If they would increase the share, either they would be banned from sale or they will have additional quotas, meaning the German cars would have to become more expensive for the consumer. So the major instrument of international trade regulations are quotas and tariffs. So this is why we need the customs, because through the customs, through the tariffs, through the barriers, we try to regulate international trade so that it won't harm our local producers. The thing is that, as you all know, Germany and France are part of European Union, two major member states of European Union, and within European Union you cannot impose trades and tariffs. Had the Germany been away from the European Union, France would have the right to impose a tariff. However, they are defenseless on German exports because they have a common market. Meaning, well, either they will have to leave the market, meaning to leave the European Union and lose a lot of benefits, or they'll have to deal with the competition and actually decrease production of their cars and machinery. However, is it clear on trade and tariffs? Things actually they're much more complicated, but we won't pick them all. In case you have any questions, please you may interrupt. World Trade Organization is a much more complex organization than it used to be in 1947. So in 1947 it was the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. So since the 70s, a charter of the World Trade Organization was signed. And actually all the states that become part of the World Trade Organization, they receive the right to be become part of the global trade. Second, they have the right, well, first they have the attraction of foreign markets. However, they will have to open their domestic market for the international. There was only one organization in the history of the World Trade Organization that was allowed to enter the WTO on its own terms. Can you guess the country? China. Easy. Yes. World Trade Organizations during the debates and negotiations, they wanted China to become more open and to regulate their trade. However, Chinese being already in 90s, being a huge production market, being a huge consumption market already, they stepped their foot forward and they made the agreement beneficial for them. Well, so after joining the World Trade Organization, you can follow the stats of Chinese growth. It skyrocketed. So after 90s, China became increasingly more competitive and its export grew. further. So, like in 2008, if I'm not mistaken, either 2008 or 2009, it was the first year when Chinese exports overrun the volume of the German export. Because before 2009, Germany was dominating on the export area. Today they're, I guess, third after China and Japan. Besides productions and regulations, what else do we need to know about international economic relations? So actually international economic relations, they comprise out of 4 areas. So the first one is international trade that we discussed. The next one is international finance. So the global movement of the capital. Then international monetary system. That's the global movement of money. You know the difference between capital and money, right? More or less. Capital is also money, but okay, money is regulated differently than the capital. And international migration. Because again, in the global market, we have another important point of international economic relations, and this is the second part of our lecture, that's entrepreneurship. Can you tell me what's the entrepreneurship? Right.
Entrepreneurship is basically getting into business, maybe some sort of innovation with the intention of bearing all risk and profit.
Getting into business?
Creating business with the intention of bearing the risk and the profit.
That's actually very correct. Creating business with the intention to having risk and profit. Right. Yes?
Actually, I have an example. I cannot describe it, but I have an example. For example, a business is when you buy something for $1 and you send it for $2. But the entrepreneurship is when you buy the same product, for example, let's say bananas, for $1, then you make the juice and you sell it for $5.
Okay, this is what we call the added value, right? That's the difference between speculation and entrepreneurship. I should say that entrepreneurship is also business, meaning business is a wide variety of actions. So actually, business is an economic activity, is the result-oriented economic activity. Prior definition was the financial result-oriented economic activity, but today it might not be even financially oriented business. Well, for example, guys, you need to talk. We shouldn't talk all together, right? We're kind of trying to study here. Thank you. Okay, so today if you run a charity fund, you still run a charity fund on the principles of the business. However, you don't necessarily need to get the financial result, but you have the economic result, like the amount of people you save. That might be an economic result. So yes, entrepreneurship is part of the business. Well, your first example, when you buy for $1, sell for $2, that's called a speculation. However, speculation is not bad. Well, actually, we need speculation to run the financial liquidity. So, for example, you all use currency exchange boxes, right? You get somewhere you get dollars, but you need to spend hryvnias, so you look for a currency exchange booth, and you get those couple of hryvnias. The thing is, like the traditional market works on the principle of supply and demand, meaning that somewhere there is a person who needs dollars as much as you need hryvnias. And so you meet and you make an exchange. However, it's not like that, because it will be tougher for you to find a specific person, so this is why you need the speculator. So meaning the bank buys your dollars a bit lower, then it will sell them to this person further. So actually speculators, they provide financial liquidity for entrepreneurs as well. But absolutely correct, entrepreneurship is about starting something new. You start something new, and the thing we started discussing on the start of the lecture, the value added. Well, you should start producing something new with the high value added. And this is where things become complicated, because you have each of you have your personal entrepreneurship genius and ability to create something. But besides your personal capabilities, there are institutional limitations. So institutions, they're like rules and obligations. So for example, you all know Pablo Escobar from the movie Narcos. He was a genius of entrepreneur, but he would never exist in a country like Soviet Union. Okay, not a single entrepreneur would exist in a country of Soviet Union. He would never exist in a country as Canada, because Canada has strict institutions that forbid illegal production and trade. Colombia has had significantly worse institutions, rules and obligations, and the rule of law than Canada. So Pablo Escobar could appear in Colombia. He could have appeared in Afghanistan. He could have appeared in some other failed states, but he couldn't appear in a country with the proper institutions. So this is where you have falsely positive development of entrepreneurship. At the same time, could have Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, who are also brilliant entrepreneurs, who made their career in the United States of America, could have they become successful in Mongolia, for example? Absolutely no. And what makes you be so sure?
Well, Mongolia doesn't have resources or human capital to have such advanced businesses, I suppose.
Yeah, so first of all, you also need institutions.
Yes.
For example, those of you who use Siri, well, you use iPhones and you know you have the personal assistant Siri on your iPhones. Right, you know what I'm talking about. The guy who created the Siri product, he has been developing it since 90s. Can you imagine that? So he started a business of voice assistant in 90s when there was no even proper internet in those times. Right? It was a dial-up internet. Your hard drives on your personal computers were about 40, 60 megabytes. But Guy has been already creating this voice assistant. So actually he has been developing it for like 17 years, and he was waiting for some other incremental developments, technological advances for him to move forward. So yes, Google made their personal assistants much faster than 17 years. Again, in 19 there was no Google at all. So yes, besides entrepreneurship genius, you also need the institutions, meaning the environment. Like, imagine the entrepreneur be a seed and the environment be the earth where the seed would grow. It won't grow in sand, but it will grow in fertile land. It was a bad case in, I think before 19, when we had a bipolar system of international relations. Meaning, before the collapse of Soviet Union, international relations was, again, what meaning a bipolar. We had the first world and we had the second world. Meaning we had the capitalist states and we had the socialist states. And another group of countries that was named something as third world states. We don't use the word third world states today anymore because we only have one world. However, we have the definition of least developed countries. That's a bit different. So after the collapse of Soviet Union and the collapse of the bipolar system of international relations, world became global. We entered the stage of the global village, and entrepreneurs were allowed to migrate. So, for example, another notorious entrepreneur, Elon Musk. You know where he was born? South Africa. But where he started his business? Canada, but later on in US. Okay, because it was much more difficult for him to start the same business as PayPal in South Africa in 90s. It's possible today. Today South Africa is actually a technologically developed country. However, it was far from being like that in 90s. So yes, such an entrepreneur could move. And today each of you also can move, can flee from the state you don't feel like will support your entrepreneurship genius. And you can start it over in European Union, in United States of America, in Japan, Singapore, or Qatar, wherever you feel like that. But is this good or bad for the country where you're from?
Well, it depends.
That's like the best answer on economic classes. It always depends on something, right? It depends. Like my favorite story is about American President Harry Truman. You might remember he was president of the US after the World War II, after Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he had the saying like, bring me the one-handed economist. Because all the economists who commented on his actual, well, on the other hand, I don't need the another hand. I need just one hand, so bring me one-handed economist. Okay, it depends. That's correct, but it depends on what?
I mean, like, if you have some kind of idea for some invention or innovation, you can go to the United States because they support like intellectual advancement of some sort. So it's the appropriate breeding ground for your idea. But as soon as your idea has come to life, you can always migrate this because it's easier for example, if you're from Africa, they don't have the resources to support something that may or may not be. But as soon as your idea comes to life in the US, for example, like they would give everything to support this idea. I feel much more than the United States would do because, for example, in like not the third world country, but the least developed places, they need this advancement more to bring them out of some kind of, I don't know, social or financial crisis anyway, more than the United States. So they will support you, in my opinion.
No, that's actually a very nice opinion, and this is correct. Because, okay, economically, economy is the science of figures. You have your personal benefit, yes?
I have an opinion,
Right.
which is a little bit cultural different. I think everything would be good. First of all, if you're innovating your country, trying to help increase the economy of your country, and then if maybe your country is suffering from some crisis, you can help some help abroad. Yeah, so all the sides are good.
Well, but the thing is, we always know the history of winners, right? We only learn from the best case scenario, but we generally forget about all the others. So when a person is leaving the country, okay, my voice is already. Я уже не могу говорить, извините. Потерпите еще 15 минут и полакайте о чем-то. Where was I?
We always learn from.
Yeah, you always learn from the best. Yeah, thank you. So we always know some good cases, but we don't know the bad cases. So in case all the talented people leave the country and they start on their businesses in other more prosperous and more institutionalized environments, we get their cases like Elon Musk. But how many people actually left the country to Canada and created successful business? I think much more than one. A lot of them failed. Because again, these migrational policies, they also should be regulated to produce the best overall result. And the development of countries on the modern level, it's not about competition of becoming more or less successful state. Well, we all know that the most successful economy in the world is United States of America. It's like 22% of the global economy is United States of America. Just imagine the figure. The second country is China, about 12-13% of the global economy. So these countries are heavily concentrated on capital, possibilities. However, they are completely different. Institutions of China are completely different from institutions of political institutions are completely different. However, economic institutions, they have a lot in common. And you might follow the modern news about some economic wars between China and US, and it's about trade. Because today you want to grow, today you want to develop, because there is actually only one problem of economy. Can you name me the only economic problem there is?
Regulations.
Hmm?
Regulations.
No, it's a very complicated problem. But we need to, well, the regulations is the problem trying to solve the basic economic problem. Basic economic problem.
Cost of production.
It's much easier than that. Basic economic problem is that we have lack of resources, but demand is unlimited. Yes, because human demand isn't limited by anything, but resources are. So actually, this is the only problem economy wants to exist. Had we had unlimited resources, we wouldn't have to regulate anything. We wouldn't have to be employed. We just get it. So, yes, like economic goal, economic task is to distribute resources in the best possible, in the most efficient way. And if you concentrate resources in one hand, it's like the black hole, you know, it's a body with a massive gravitation that it destroys everything. Because, for example, imagine one country will collect all the money in the world, what would happen? It won't make this country successful because money will lose value immediately. Because if there are no money, but only one guy concentrates that, well, money becomes less valuable because they don't produce the functions they have to. Same with economy. You can't have one solid economy and all the other being underdogs. You have to balance it somehow. So this is the modern problem of economy. This balance between developing countries and countries and economies in transition and the front row of the developed states. And the lack of human capital in countries in transition, in economies in transition, also is the long-term commitment and the long-term threat for those states that are accumulating this human capital these days. So these are the regulations we need to talk about, we need to figure out. Because inequality is bad on the global scale. And inequality is bad not only between one state, but also on the global market. So inequality is the thing we have to discuss, we have to speak about. And entrepreneurship is actually one of the drivers of inequality. Because from the one side, we all should be guided by our individual needs and our possibilities. Like, you know, Abraham Maslow once said, there is no better way to become miserable than not to use your possibilities. So yes, entrepreneurs should drive it. However, as we started the definition of entrepreneurship, this is the start of the new business, and actually it starts small. And you cannot regulate these small businesses. And the generation, especially this well-known thing as Generation Z, I think you're Generation Z, right? So Generation Z is very unpredictable on that. Because we get all the researches on the possibilities of the Z generation, and you don't fit into the existing system of international relations. Like, you like to start your own things, you don't like to work on someone. You create those areas of business that don't exist yet, meaning they are not regulated. So actually you're bringing chaos into global international system. And that might be a good thing, because, you know, chaoses, they drive development in a way. However, there is a conflict between existing system of international relations and the way it is developing, and this new generation of entrepreneurs who have their own rules, guidance, and missions and aspirations. Okay, thank you very much. I wonder if you have any questions.
No, thank you.